anybody who says they don't feel meaning in their life, the two things you should look at is, what are you doing to make yourself look more like a good object of reproduction? Are you dating? Are you exercising? Are you working on your career? Because the resources that you can control through your income, etc., is all part of that reproductive signaling. So if you're not directly involved in the sex, dating, reproduction mode, and you still want meaning in your life, and there are a lot of people who are not really, following that silo. If you want meaning, ask yourself what you're doing for other people. What are you doing to support the species? What did you do for charity? What did you do for somebody who couldn't help themselves? What did you do to make the world more prosperous, more happy, more less suffering? Do you talk to yourself out loud? Only if I'm having ADHD problems. So one of my more popular videos I did quite a while ago is teaching people how to focus when they can't focus. And one of the tricks I use is to narrate my physical actions. So there are so many times when I sit at my computer and I know I need to do some work and I just can't do it. My brain is 1,000 different places. I want to click on websites. I want to follow this story. I want to tweet something. But the last thing I want to do is work, because the work often can be so boring, if it's just mechanical work, such as drawing another comic, so boring that I actually can't even talk my own brain into it. I'll sit in front of the computer and my brain just won't do it. I have a workaround for that, which is that I narrate. And so I say to myself, as I sit down at the computer, pick up the stylus, pick up the stylus, pick up the stylus. And I will repeat it until I pick up the stylus. And then I'll say, open the page, whatever page I want to work on. And I say, select the text, select the text. So whatever the task is, I repeat it until I've done the task, and then I repeat the next task. And what it does is, since your verbal abilities essentially control your thoughts. Because if you think about it, you think in words. When you have ideas about things, they're formed in actual language within your head. So if you can hijack the language in your head, which is what the repeating your next step does, it hijacks the part of your brain that controls language. It's kind of impossible to be doing language, saying, pick up the pen, pick up the stylus, open the web page, go to this, open this. You can't have two conversations in your head at the same time. You can sort of hold two thoughts a little bit in your head, but not really. You're actually just going between thoughts quickly. But you can't really have two conversations in your head. Your verbal part of your brain is just so dominant that if it's busy, that's all you can do. It's hard to talk and think at the same time. So I was doing it yesterday. Yesterday I just could not finish a comic that I needed to draw. And I just started saying, open the file, Scott, open the file, until it was opened. And I wouldn't do or say anything else until I had done that next step. Now, the other thing I teach is how to get off the couch. There'll be more of this in my upcoming book. But one of the tricks you can use to get motivated to do something big is to not think of it as something big. So let's say you said to yourself, I should really go to law school. And and forget about this being a goal for you. It's just something big, whatever it is. I should start a company. I should go to law school. If you have that thought, maybe I should go to law school, that's such a big thought that it's hard to say, okay, today's the day I'm going to make that happen, unless you're quite motivated. If you need a little help, ask yourself, what's the smallest thing you can do in that direction, and then do it. The smallest thing you do might be to Google a list of law schools within driving distance. And just do that. Don't do anything else. Just Google the list of law schools within driving distance. You have to break your steps into the smallest and smallest chunks until you find something so easy, you can do it. And Googling is easy, so just do that. After you've done that, say, what's the next thing I can do that's so easy, I can't not do it? Well, the next thing might be to look at a couple of those schools and just drill down. Maybe you just want to find out what they cost, and you're done for the day. That's it. You just found out a general cost for a school that you liked. You're done for the day. Next day, one small thing. I call them micro steps. So I use this technique all the time. And I often start projects that I don't complete because I get to a stage where it doesn't look like it's a good idea anymore. But I can get there fairly quickly through these micro steps. So at any given time, I've got several projects going on where I can just pick at them micro step at a time. Some of them will take on a life of their own. The things that end up being important are the things where the energy comes from the project. Other people say you have to be passionate about it, etc. But the way I like to put it is that, and a good example of this is writing a book. When I sit down to write a book, do you know how big of a mental, let's say, challenge that is? If you've never written a book, just for a moment, think about an author who sits down and says, now I'm going to start to write a book. Wow. It's a gigantic, daunting, totally off-putting task because it's so big. So what I do is I write a title. So I open a file that, a little note file on my computer, and I say, what will I call it? And then I realize that I don't have a good title name. So because I don't have a good title name, should I wait until the next day? Never. You have to take a micro step. Never, ever back off from a micro step. If it's too big, make it smaller. If that's still too big, make that smaller. There is something small enough that you're going to do. So if I can't think of a good title, even if that's the smallest thing I can think of to do you know what I do? I write down a bad title. Because having the right title was too big a step. But writing down a bad title on a note is such a small step that anybody can do it, so I do it. And then I say to myself, I can think of a second bad title, and I write that down. Maybe the next day I look at those bad titles and I go, those are bad titles. How about another one? 20 seconds of work, right? I'm starting a book that's going to take me months. It's going to basically eat up, all of my free time for a year. But I might spend 20 seconds the first day, just 20 seconds. The second day, I might spend a full minute because I'm starting to see that the bad titles have a path to becoming a good title. Then I might open a document and give it that working title, knowing that the title will change. It always does. And then I'll write a first sentence. And then I'll close it, and I'll do my other work for the day. So to start a gigantic project, do the micro steps until you've done enough micro steps that the project starts to tap you on the shoulder when you're not thinking about it. What you want is that you're doing something for leisure. You're just thinking about other things. Your day has gone on. You might be taking a walk. You might be at the gym. And something taps you on the shoulder, your own brain, and says, I can think of what a good chapter would be. I don't know the writing of the chapter, but I can think of a topic that would be good for that book. And then I write it down. And the next day, I'll just write, this would be a good chapter title. That's it. Now, at some point, after I've written a few pages, because I keep micro-stepping my way through, there's almost always a day where I sit down and get excited and say, this would be a good chapter. I don't know if this is a book, but I'm going to write a good chapter. And this good chapter won't be good on the first pass. It'll be a bad chapter. That's what I have time for. So I write a bad chapter. I have to work on it a lot before it's a good chapter. So that's how you do it. You just pick your way through the micro steps, and you keep shortening the micro steps until there's something you can do. If you've done enough of those micro steps, the project should start giving you energy instead of requiring it. That's the step that tells you you're an author. If you can't ever experience that, you're probably not an author, and it's maybe not the work you should be doing. I suppose you could power yourself through a book hating every step of it, but at some point, you have to feel that thing that says, I'm not putting energy into this project anymore. This project is now giving me energy. It's a source of energy. It's not a use of energy. And so I'm looking for that transition period where it becomes a source of energy. All right. Motivation by moderation, somebody's calling it. I like my words, Microsteps. How do you find your purpose? Excellent question. A lot of people ask me, what's the meaning of life? What's your purpose? I've thought about this a lot, as many of you have, and I've come to, I think, a view that is either compatible with Jordan Peterson's or similar. I don't want to summarize his opinion, but I think there are other people who have hit on similar approaches philosophically. Here's what I've discovered. Whenever I'm doing things which are compatible with my basic biological design, I feel purpose in my life. So that's the standard that I use. And it's very consistent. Let me give you an example. I've never had a day where I had great sex and I was also concerned about the meaning of life. That's not a joke. I've never had a day where I had great sex and I was also concerned about the meaning of life. Let me tell you why. There's a reason. All right? It's not a joke. There is a reason. The sexual act is, even if you're not trying to reproduce, your body and your brain recognize it as part of the reproductive process. It's your most basic biological function. It's the one you're born to do. What are you born to do? Reproduce. And reproduce well. That's the second part. So, if I'm doing something that is supportive of the, let's say, sexual and or reproductive process, no matter how indirect, it gives me purpose. Okay? Now, I get greater purpose doing things that are good for the human, let's say, the human species. So a lot of stuff you see me do in public is specifically because I know that if I do something that looks like it's a positive for human beings in some way that, is meaningful, that makes me feel purpose. Now, I believe that if you feel purpose, you have purpose. Somebody says, yeah, but I'm 63 and have 2 grown-up kids. If you have 2 grown-up kids, you probably feel purpose whenever you interact with them, think about them, realize that you have created 2 new humans. So I don't think you have to have the kids to feel your connection to your biological, let's say, truth. But you could just go through the process of doing the things that makes babies without actually making the baby. So I would ask you this. If you feel that you don't have meaning in your life, ask yourself, how much are you doing that would be supportive of your own reproductive capabilities? And for that, I would say, are you exercising? Are you eating right? Are you taking care of your appearance? Have you refreshed your wardrobe so that you look good? Could you get a haircut? right? All of those things you might tell yourself you're doing for other reasons. People like to lie to themselves and say, I'm making myself look good, not for other people, but for my own self. I'm doing it because it feels good for me. That's never true. Everything you do is some kind of a ripple effect from the fact that you are biologically designed to reproduce and to reproduce well, meaning the best genetic material you can get your hands on reproductively is what you're designed to find. So anybody who says they don't feel meaning in their life, the two things you should look at is, what are you doing to make yourself look more like a good object of reproduction? Are you dating? Are you exercising? Are you working on your career? Because the resources that you can control through your income, etc., is all part of that reproductive signaling. So if you're not directly involved in the sex, dating, reproduction mode, and you still want meaning in your life, and there are a lot of people who are not really, following that silo. If you want meaning, ask yourself what you're doing for other people. What are you doing to support the species? What did you do for charity? What did you do for somebody who couldn't help themselves? What did you do to make the world more prosperous, more happy, more less suffering? So if you're doing those things, then you're compatible with your biological self. You don't need any God in there. You don't need any God. God is a bonus. If you believe in God and it works for you, I'm all for it. For those who don't know, I say this often, but I'm not a believer. Religious-wise, I'm not a believer, but I'm a big proponent and big supporter of religion, when religion is used productively. So Christianity, probably one of the best inventions ever. It organizes people's thoughts and lives, gives them meaning. It's a very useful thing for people who are believers. All right. So somebody is questioning whether gay people can feel the meaning of life. And the answer is yes, in all the ways that everybody else does. No difference. Because I said to you that even if you're, let's say you're straight and you're just having meaningless sex, you're not trying to reproduce. You're just doing something that's sort of a theater or a reflex, essentially, that connects you to that feeling of being part of the reproductive process. My assumption is that if you're anywhere in the LGBTQ community and you too do anything that's sort of a shadow of, similar to, remind you of reproduction, even if those things don't reproduce, but if they're in the same realm of experience that creates those good feelings of sexual satisfaction, however you're getting it, my guess is that you feel more connected, and that you feel that you're not as desperate to seek meaning because you sort of already have it. Yeah, not everyone wants kids. So it is absolutely not necessary to have your own children to feel connected to the reproductive, I'll say, design of your body. Is helping the earth with trees helpful? Yeah, I would think that if you thought that climate change was threatening the world, and threatening the human species in particular, and you went out and planted trees every day just to do your small part, by yourself, you're not going to plant enough trees to make a difference. But if you thought other people were, and it was part of the big process, you probably would feel meaning from that. Yes. So here's the test. Ask yourself if you're doing enough things that are at least remind you of or connect you to the reproductive process, or at least, if you're not part of that in any way, if you're not having sex, you're not raising kids, you're not a grandparent, if you're not part of any of that directly, at least you're doing something for the species. Because when you're doing something for the species, you're doing things for other people's kids.